Without further ado, Cachette Dance Company, Part 2.
All right, hello again. Hello, everyone. For those of you who weren't here at our first presentation this morning, my name is Shira Greenberg. I'm the founder and artistic director of Cachette Dance and Center for the Arts in Albuquerque. And we operate a number of different programs under our Arts and Justice Initiatives programming umbrella. As I mentioned earlier, Cachette's been teaching in the New Mexico juvenile prison system for the past 26 years. And teaching a curriculum called M3, which we developed, which stands for Movement Plus Mentorship Equals Metamorphosis. Over the course of these 26 years, it became really clear that what we were doing, while it was really important and impactful, it was not addressing the deeper systems issues that we were in the middle of. And so it was really, felt like we were putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger wound that we needed to address. So, in addition to the mentorship-based programming we were doing, we realized we really needed to start addressing policy change. And to effectively actuate policy change, we knew we needed to ensure that we had strong partners that could translate the work that we were doing in practice to data and research and evidence-based practices. So it was also really important to us to find a partner that was truly aligned with our values and putting youth voices first and foremost, and the deep wisdom that comes from our young community. So thankfully, we found an amazing partner with New Mexico Voices for Children and spent the past few years digging into this process. The result is a report that is on, I think, accessible in your app, called Art as an Alternative: Adverse Childhood Experiences, Probation, and Informal Diversion in New Mexico's Juvenile System. It's a long title, but it's an amazing report. And together, we really explored the data side of how arts-based diversionary programming can help support youth who have faced childhood trauma and have been in the juvenile justice system, and how arts programming like Cachette's and many others can build resiliency and help young New Mexicans find their path to healing and success. We know that research shows that the events that kids experience as in their childhood, they carry with them for the rest of their lives, and children's chances of being healthy and doing well in school and reaching their full potential are tied to these experiences during their younger years. And of course, we know this instinctively, but it can be concerning when you think about that in context of the data that shows that New Mexico ranks poorly when it comes to children who have experienced many of these adverse childhood experiences, and really high for children who have experienced 3 or more. So we know that system-impacted youth are more likely than their peers to have experienced many of these traumas. And we also know that every one of us is more than the worst things that have happened to us. We know that. And we also know that our youth are resilient. We know that our communities are strong. And we know that there are really creative solutions that can help our youth grow and thrive. So I hope you have a chance to look at that report. And this report has all this information in really amazing narrative and data and statistics, but what you see on the stage, what you saw earlier today and what you'll see in a minute, is essentially that report in movement, embodied in movement. And so to us, that is our language, so we're excited to be able to share that with you. So this next piece that you're gonna see is choreographed by Juliana Gorena, who is a youth leader at Cachette. She is a co-chair of Cachette's Youth Leadership Council. She's also one of the performers in this piece. This piece is called Once Again, and in it she's addressing the feelings of the cycles within the systems around us and the difficulty that it can feel like to break these cycles. There are a few more people in this piece, so for safety purposes, we'll be performing on the floor rather than on the stage. So if you want to get up and move around to be able to see what they're doing, please feel free to. And enjoy. Thank you so much. I'll be back after.
That's a strange mistake to make. You should turn the other cheek. Living in a glass house. Of course I like to sit around and chat. Of course I like to stay and chew the fat. Well, of course I like to sit around and chat. There's someone listening in.
One more round of applause for them. Yay. As we wrap up, I want to share with you a quote from Nell Bernstein, who's the author of Burning Down the House. She says, "Rehabilitation happens in the context of relationship. Meanwhile, virtually every aspect of our juvenile prison system is designed to disrupt and deny relationships, not foster or forge them, running counter to this fundamental aspect of human nature." And we at Keshet really believe that the arts and the process of collaborative art making in a supportive environment are an amazingly powerful tool to build relationships. And we believe in valuing the voice and the experience of every one of the amazing artists that we work with inside prison walls and outside of prison walls. We believe that young people should be empowered and inspired and supported to create solutions. And we believe that that starts with young people being empowered to create. And so that is what we do. So thank you so much for allowing us to be here and share a little bit with you. We've been honored to be part of your day. Thank you all so much for what you all do to support youth in our community and communities all over the country. And thank you. Just have a wonderful rest of your day of learning. And thank you so much for sharing the time with us. We appreciate it.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, it's really bright. Well, come on. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. And again, thank you to the Keshet Dance Company. That was just extraordinary. And I think it really, I know I will speak personally, it drew me in to the point that I forgot I was going to have to come up here and do something next. Really beautiful. And I also think a wonderful way to segue into this particular panel that's going to focus on intergenerational healing. And I want to start out before I introduce the panel and we begin. First of all, for those who I don't know, my name is Melody Barnes, and I'm the chair of the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions. And it is such a pleasure to be in community with you all again. And I know we have been trying to get here now for several years and navigating through COVID and all of the things that prevented us from being in this place. So it is just, it's wonderful and an extraordinary moment. And we are now at the point of our closing plenary. So we're also wrapping up a couple of days of, I think, really transformative experiences, having been hosted by the Hopi Foundation, being here now in Santa Ana Pueblo, having the opportunity to focus on restorative practices, to focus on the ways that we can build more effective pathways and be in community for and with young adults. And I feel just very appreciative of that time and all the work that each of you is doing. And I think in particular, after the morning and the day that we've had, there's no better time to have this conversation about intergenerational healing. I'm thinking about the panel this morning and the comment that was made at the end of the day that we are rich in culture, and so let us share it. And I think that's what this panel is about. This is what our work is about, and our time in convening is about. And so we're going to spend the next hour or so in conversation, including in conversation with you, with leaders from Del Norte and Tribal Lands, from Hopi and Hawai'i. And we're going to consider the ways that healing is woven into youth programming and informs the work of community. And I think the stories and strategies that you'll hear about hopefully will be not only meaningful to you, but also give you an opportunity to think about ways that you can take those strategies home and build them into your own work. And so without further ado, I want to introduce those who are gathered on the stage with me. So sitting right next to me, we have Michelle Correa from Del Norte. And then I'm going to jump over for 1 second. It'll make sense in a second. I want to introduce Lexi Michael James from Hopi, who also serves on the OYF Leadership Council. And then finally, Sean Malia Kana Iopuni, who is from, thank you, who is from Hawaii. And I wanted to introduce Sean last because Sean is going to also help draw us into this moment in a particular way. And I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Sean.
Thank you. I have a mic. Wow. Aloha mai kako, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. Just to say the mahalo to Na Aukua and Na Amakua, the spirits and elders of this place, and to the people, the Santa Ana Pueblo, for welcoming us here to this space today, and also to Opportunity Youth Forum, Steve, Yelena, and now Melody. You've all been so gracious to allow our Hawai'i community and embrace us in this family that is all of you. And so I come from Pupukea, Oahu, and we wanted to do a little oli that opens up this space and brings forth knowledge and sharing and removes any negativity, not that I can imagine there is any here. And so just want to invite my Hawaii Ohana up here, if any of you want to come join me in doing this oli. And I'm really grateful that we have this delegation of youth, OPO as we call them. Yeah, come. Hanu. You want to lead it? E ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e. E ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna no iau, o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e a. E ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna no iau, o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e a ho mai, kai ke mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna no iau, o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e. Mahalo. Thank you guys. It goes up and up and up. I might have started a little high. Sorry, guys. But you can see it is calling for our knowledge from above, from all of our hidden knowledge sources of ike, or knowledge that are contained in song and chants and dance, the beautiful dancing that we just saw, and bring it forth into this room. Mahalo.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you to all of you for bringing us in that way. As I said, this panel will focus on intergenerational healing. And I think the best way to start, and Michelle, I'm going to start with you, is to ask you how you define healing and how that shows up in your work.
You know, I think in so much of the work, it's less of a definition and more of a way of being. In what I have had the privilege of being taught by so many of those who have come before me, and the youth that I have continued to work with, it has to be interwoven into everything you do. It's not a separate thing. And so often in our Western society, we treat it as that. Oh, you're not feeling well, go to the doctor, right? It's a separate thing, you have to go do that. Versus seeing what are all the different things in the way that you work, the way that you live your life, and being really truly present in the moment and appreciating what is around you. And so for me, personally, healing is about being in nature and being as close and connected to the place that I'm in. And so being here in this beautiful place, right? Taking the time to step outside. And I hope all of you take a moment to breathe in the air that's here and look around and use your senses to really reflect and see what's here and the beauty that's here. And that, bringing that in, that brings in that power of healing, and to be really truly present to what you need to do in the moment, and it'll provide for you.
That's beautiful. My guess is that has resonated with a number of people. I remember one of our convenings in Aspen and talking to some of the young adults who were there, and they were talking about being in nature as you described, and the feeling was, what I will never forget it, someone said, it makes me feel like I can fly. And that still gives me chills. Lexi, can you tell us what your thoughts are with regard to healing and how it shows up for you and in your work?
So, for me, healing.
Oh, hold on one second. Is her mic? Ah, there we go.
Mic not turned off, so use that one. It should be. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I like to think I'm loud enough as well. I've had lots of pageant girl training. But for me, healing has always been nonlinear. I come from very adverse circumstances, as do much of the Native youth on reservations. And when we talk about healing, we look at it in the sense that it's an ongoing journey. Because the unique circumstances of intergenerational trauma, that we're not just healing our trauma, we're healing our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. And there's the saying in Native culture that when we heal ourselves, we're not only healing us here today, the one single person. We're healing 7 generations back and 7 generations forward, because what we do for ourselves, we're doing for our people who could not, and so that those in the future do not have to do the healing themselves. And so when we talk about healing and why it should be at the center of everything, and I liked what Michelle said, that it's integrated into everything. When we go running, you're carrying prayers. When you're cooking, you're thinking about the joy and the sustenance and the strength that it's going to bring the people who are going to eat it. When you sing songs, you're speaking the language and you're calling to, the beings that are around us. And when you're showing affection, to your family members. I come from a family where my mom, she was not shown very much affection. And so when I am like constantly hugging on her and loving on her, she's had to adapt and get used to it. And, she finally talked about it, saying, my parents didn't show me affection, so I didn't know how to do that. And I was like, oh, well, I'm so sorry that I forced you to heal, but also I need that in a sense that it's integrated into every bit of our lives, and that it's not linear, and we're going to have those times where it's going to hit us hard. And so what healing means to me is just making sure that not only am I going to be okay, but my siblings are going to be okay, that my mom's healed, and that when I have children, they're not going to have to deal with that. They're going to be able to live the life that, we all deserve to live. So, to me, healing in so many words is just making sure that everyone's good to go and that we can all continue this journey together.
Nice. And so it's forward and back. I'm curious, Sean, how do you think about this, and how is it integrated into your work and into the community?
Wow, it's such a powerful question. I'm glad you're like physical embrace. We Hawaiians, we're huggy, embracey people. And it really comes from our sense of aloha, and alo is face and ha is breath. And when you say aloha, you're sharing breath with somebody. So when I say aloha to you, we are sharing breath, and our relationship begins based on that premise. And it was really interesting because when I was with the Hopi, they talked about their word for breath, which is hiksi, and it's recognizing the shared breath that comes from all the generations of people that have passed down their knowledge, which is very similar to our Hawaiian tradition, which is oral, which is also an oral tradition of knowledge. So we had to be very good at remembering things. But since I'm not that good, I wrote a few notes down. One of the things that is really critical, and I don't know, how many of you have been to Hawaii? Oh, good, quite a few. Okay, so most people know it as an amazing and beautiful paradise destination for people to come and enjoy and relax and get in the ocean and, breathe the beautiful balmy air, very unlike this beautiful air. But it's also a place that has undergone significant trauma. And the first thing about healing is recognizing the historical trauma that exists in every single Native Hawaiian alive today. Knowing that 90% of our population was wiped out at one point by Western contact and disease and warfare. And that is really important because my daughter's a biologist, so I can say this with a lot of certainty. She tells me that historical trauma is transmitted genetically through our DNA. You can actually trace it in our blood, in our bones, in our skin, and it's there. And so when people come to Hawaii and they expect that it's just going to be a happy place and you don't ever experience pain, well, that's a different thing than what we encounter in the daily life of living there. And unfortunately, tourism kind of masks and makes us invisible to everyone who comes to visit our place. And so the first thing about healing is recognizing that historical trauma, and really loved what you said about the aina, the land, that which in our language is that which feeds us, and that which, if we care for properly, will continue to feed us. And across the world, we've just seen a huge degradation of our lands and our seas and our climate, and that's because of humans. We're the biggest plague on earth, right? And malama ika'aina is one of our values, which means to care for the land that cares for you. And so healing is about reconnecting with the land and understanding your kinship with it, no matter who you are. You don't have to be Hawaiian, but when I'm in Hawaii, I know that I come from those mountains. I know that I come from that earth. I know that I come from that ocean. And I think that's part of the journey that every single person alive has to make in healing. And then one other thing, can I just add one other thing and then I'll stop? I do want to get to questions because that's the fun part. But the really important thing in the healing alongside our youth that we serve every day and our community, because really we are about community building and nation building. Our Hawaiian Lahui, our kingdom was overtaken by force and illegally annexed into the United States. And against a petition signed almost by every living Hawaiian alive at the time. And our queen was imprisoned, and it goes on and on from there. But an important sense of healing, it comes from kuleana. And when we talk about kuleana, that's responsibility. And as responsibility, we think about 3 piko, which are centers in your body. Your responsibility, your kuleana, the first piko is on your head, the ancestral kuleana that we have to our past. Our second piko is here in the middle, your navel, and that's our kuleana to our present, to everyone alive, to these youth that are back here with us from Hawaii. And then our last piko is from our genitalia, which is that kuleana to our future generations that we may have ourselves and that are also part of our place and our community and our planet, really the earth. So that's healing in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to pick up on something that you were saying. You were talking about, people coming to Hawaii and, it's kind of almost a Disneyfication of the experience there. It's like, here I am in this happy place without an understanding of what has happened there. And you are also talked about being deeply immersed in the healing experience, the connection to the land, the connection to the geography. And I'm wondering, perhaps starting with you, but curious, obviously, Lexi and Michelle, what you have to say about this. When you talk about healing from each of your experiences, the work that you're doing in your communities, how do you find that it resonates or not with those in other places, in other geographies, in other communities? Are there central threads that you see? Is there a disconnect? Just tell us more about your thoughts on that.
Well, I guess you would have to say, it would be a question I put out to you about whether you find, whether the things that I'm talking about right now, even responsibility, aloha, which means compassion, kindness, empathy, if that resonates with you. What I saw earlier with the gentleman from the Cochiti Pueblo, Regis, he talked about core values, and somebody mentioned that those core values are things that we all carry inside of us, right? So I think the way that we have cultivated values like aloha, which is respect, dignity, compassion, empathy for others, kindness, is something that resonates with most people. The way that we live it and practice it might be unique and special. When we went to the Hopi nation, we saw makahana ka'ike, which is what we call knowledge from doing, learning from doing. We learned from their youth there what they were learning from the practice of doing in the programs that they were in. So that's something that I found I resonated with as a Hawaiian listening to them. And we have something called ho'oponopono, which is a form of ritualized peacemaking that, and you let me know if it resonates with you. It's ho'o is to make, and pono is to make right. So ho'oponopono means to make right, extra right. And it is significant because it means making yourself pono within, which is your righteousness within. Sometimes that means forgiving yourself. It means being pono with those that you've interacted with, sometimes that you may have hurt. And then it means pono, those that you've interacted with and that you have a relationship with, coming back to the table to also make peace with you together. And that requires, it's a very sophisticated and technical practice, but I think it resonates with people maybe in the form of restorative justice or other similar kinds of things. So those are a couple of examples to answer that question.
Lexi, Michelle? They're tossing it back to each other. Michelle, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the concept, when we get down to shared values, that goes anywhere in how you approach the world. And the one that I've seen resonate the most has been the idea of empathy. Like, everybody wants to be heard and understood and seen in some way. And a lot of the trauma and the challenges that we've faced in our communities have been the erasure of our history, the complete, trying to make invisible. And so the power of the collective storytelling in this network and sharing those stories together and seeing, and that I know there's other communities across the country that know our story and I know theirs, and that solidarity and that is just so powerful.
Sorry, my res girl came out for a minute. I was like, go ahead, you go first. No, but what they shared about the land, and we all know the history about reservations, and we know the history about the long walk, the Trail of Tears, and when we talk about healing, specifically in Indian country, and our indigenous relatives, not just from the U.S. but from all across, is that we're all facing the same internal struggle. We're all facing the same intergenerational trauma. We're all facing the same dilemma. Do I take the new knowledge and put it into my work because that's what's relevant today, or do I abandon that new teaching and continue to take what's been taught to me from my elders? I think I'm in a very unique position where I'm a young-ish person, but I was raised by the older women in my family. And so I have those old teachings instilled in me, and I do act like a grandma sometimes, and have that way of being and trying to be. I was always taught to be still and to be calm and to be collected at all times. But as I got older, I learned that was very much not me. That was not Lexi, and I don't know how to be still, and I don't know how to be calm because I feel, and I think I can speak for other tribal youth, where we don't feel like we can just sit here and be quiet about the things that are going on in our communities. The suicide rates and how high they are, the way that we're viewed as almost a forgotten people, that we're still here. And also, side note, it's Native American Heritage Month, if you didn't know. Hey. But looking at how we view the land, and I think something that I can honestly say is when we say, our youth are so resilient. I used to say that quite a bit because I was one of those resilient youth. But after a while, I thought about it and I said, man, I'm tired of being resilient. I'm tired of having to carry that. And why do I have to do that? There's that meme creator. Why do I have to heal the trauma? And I felt that because because we say our kids are so resilient, we put that on them to heal and to carry on. And rather than, hey, let me help you carry some of that load. Let me help you get a little bit further than me not carrying anything. And hey, keep up. Walking down the path. Why can't I take some of that off of you and we can get there together? We can get there safely. I'm not going to leave you hanging by yourself. And so when you're talking to indigenous tribes, it doesn't have to just be in the Southwest. It could be the tribes back east and tribes up in Canada. Our island relations, we're all facing those same struggles. And so where do we find that balance? And how do we stay connected so that we're all progressing at the same time, and we're not leaving, our relations behind.
Yeah, I am. Yes. You were talking, and a few things popped to mind. One, which I think is applicable across the board, but I think about Zora Neale Hurston and her writing and when she writes about Black women, she's like the mule of the world. But that idea, again, applicable to communities that have to carry so much. You're resilient, you're so strong, you're so strong, you're so strong, without, as you said, let us share the load. And I also think about being a Southerner. I know there are others in the room, and often people look at that experience and the trauma and the cultural memory that sits there, but at the same time, my own attachment to the land and how those two things can sit together and the importance of healing in that context. So thank you all for sharing those perspectives. And I'm wondering, as we think about the work that we do, and we are big on, and we recognize collectively the importance of system change, and making sure that systems are working, that they are integrated. As I know we used to talk about at the beginning of the work with the Aspen Institute, that individuals aren't broken, systems are broken. And I am curious how you see the work that you're doing, the things that you've talked about, the importance of healing being integrated into systems change, and how we go about doing that work. Let's see. You all are looking at me like, okay, don't call on me. But Sean, maybe we'll start with you.
Res nod, yeah, no, it's such an important question, because we have to counter the status. We have to challenge the status quo. We have to counter structural racism. We have to be warriors of change and still be resilient, but not let resilience be weaponized against us, right? The systems work, I'll just describe a little bit of the work that we're doing in Hawaii that I think is one way of addressing systems change. And we work in the sphere of youth justice. And some of our collaborative members are here, and there are others who are back home in Hawaii. And we've created this group. It's a public-private partnership, and we are all co-located on the grounds of the Hawaii Youth Correctional Facility, which is the only state corrections facility in our state. Ooh, they had the slide.
Like magic.
Thank you, Kat. So I wanted to give you the slide because it's easier to talk about it if you could see it. And by the way, somebody said, oh, you're in a rural place. Honolulu is right on the other side of that mountain, Kailua, and there's a town just below, so it's not like here. Hawaii is one of the most densely populated, or Oahu is one of the most densely populated places in our nation per capita, per square foot. But so in 2018, our legislature did a really cool thing. They allowed the renaming of this 500-acre campus, which is amazing and beautiful, to the Kauailoa Youth and Family Wellness Center, and in so doing, really creating a signal of a transformation that we all want to see happen. Before that, it was just the Hawaii Youth Correctional Facility. And so it was reframed as a place of wellness. And in that same year, 4 community organizations co-located right on the grounds. And so we're right next to the Olamana Alternative Education School and the Youth Correctional Facility, which still operates, but with many fewer youth in it. And so I'm from Partners in Development Foundation. We're a collaborative, like I said, and we run Kupa'aina Farm, which is at the bottom, and we grow, well, we say we grow life, because we grow youth and we grow food. We grow the canoe plants, our indigenous plants, so kalo, which is the taro, which is related to all forms of life in our Hawaiian creation story, including people. We grow ulu, which is breadfruit, and very good source of food. We grow mai'a, which is banana, and then a range of medicinal plants and other things. And we also are, because we're situated just below the correctional facility, the youth can come to the farm when they're not in school or during the summer and learn about food science, natural foods, Hawaiian agricultural practices, and also get their hands in the soil, which is healing in and of itself. Don't you agree? I wanted to put my hands in the soil here, but it's so darn cold, I just couldn't. But I am going to go to the river. And they can learn about that and then also have the chance to just heal and restore themselves in a place of significant beauty and learning about the stories of place. We also have on those same grounds the Residential Youth Services and Empowerment, which is RISE, which is a shelter for transitioning youth from homelessness into independent housing, and they have a shelter there. Halekipa runs an assessment center for commercially sex-trafficked minors, which is a big issue in Hawaii that most people don't know about, and 60% of the youth that are victimized are Native Hawaiian. And then Kinai'eha, which is here, and they do purpose building, mentoring, and workforce development, readiness and training. And so we four co-located on these grounds, and together with the state, with our state partners, have created what's called a pu'uhonua in Hawaiian, which is a sanctuary. It's a refuge, it's a safe place for youth to come. And the idea, and the systems change part of it is in the public-private partnership, which goes through its ups and downs, but it's a thing that we constantly work on and constantly try to get better at. But the idea is that if we put youth at the center and we all stand around those youth and link arms with each other, we create a sense of abundance rather than scarcity. Whereas any one of us working on our own we're all independent organizations. None of us were a collaborative before this. But we decided that we're gonna be different, and we're gonna create this place of abundance, this sense of abundance, where we're dealing with homelessness, we're ending youth homelessness, we're ending youth sex trafficking, we're ending food insecurity, we're putting kids into livable wage job tracks and pathways, and hopefully, meeting their educational goals as well. And we're ending youth incarceration in our state forever.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
Perfect.
Wish us luck.
Michelle, do you want to talk about the work that you were doing focused on systems change?
Yeah, systems change. It's interesting talking about systems change in a rural tribal community and a pretty conservative community, and like consistently getting the questions of, what is that? What are you talking about? What do you mean by that? Especially when we're countering these narratives of, it's all about, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and it's about personal responsibility, and these narratives that are really driven into the ethic of the community. And so then working with our young people, and so much of the storytelling and the healing piece that connects to that systems change was about them understanding what their story was, then what the story of the community was, and like what were the systems and policies, right? The powerful slides that were up here this morning, right? Looking at all of those different policies and legislature and the actions that were taken by our government to stop the being of people. And so for our young people to understand that and see all of these different pieces of it, but then to hear the collective stories, using empathy interviews and that process of our youth being the researchers and going out and helping understand those stories. Just seeing the way that they could then understand that it wasn't just them. It wasn't that they failed or that they were a bad kid or they came from a bad family. They could really start to see, there were systems that I could actually help change and transform, and what are the ways that we can do that? So the issues, and then that work inspired a whole collaborative of different community partners, from probation to different tribal courts to the school districts, all working together in the community to say, this is about building resilience and how do we create systems of healing instead of systems of trauma. And that shift of then saying, we have some of the highest childhood trauma indicators in the state of California. And the group coming together to say, we're centering young people, right? It has to be about the young people in the middle of this. To say by 2040 that we want to have the lowest indicators in the state. And shifting and setting those goals and saying we want to end these systems. It takes time. It takes that collective action of the storytelling. We found it's really powerful to also, I don't know, with the slides, I have some up, but there's some visuals that are in not just telling the story, and this is the place that I come from, so these are the redwoods. So we talk about the healing power of nature, just standing in the redwoods and the connection, and redwoods themselves and the connection. But in the work and in the understanding the stories, the power of then sharing those out with the community so that you have a broader sense of what's going on. And I don't know if there's a clicker or not, sorry. I just want to make sure I can show this, thank you. So this is the mouth of the Klamath River near the village of Rakoi and the Yurok people. So when we talk about young people and their stories, these are the young people. These are who our leaders are in the community and who are organizing, and they're working with policymakers, and they're running job fairs and enrolling students in college, and are now, I've got Tyler with the blue beanie. He's got his master's in social work now, and we've got Jessica Ortiz, who came to this conference a couple years ago, and she's an organizer, and so she's organizing for parent education and access. And we have this group of young men sitting with the senator and talking about the issues that they care about in community, and just the way that they could mobilize and talk about and say, this is important to us, and how do we center healing, how do we create the supports, how do we get more alignment so that the community can be behind this. Here's working in one of the continuation schools and a group of young people that, again, organized in their school to say, well, what's important to us is access to healthy cooking and nutrition. So they organized to get, use school budget to bring in foods, and cultural cooking, leaders came in and money to pay for that. But in this, these are some of the visuals. It was with the young people, teaching them to think about, like, what are the 5 steps of asking these questions? How do you build rapport? Understanding their world and really stepping in to seek to understand, and really getting to the story that takes you deeper, and the questions to focus on what matters most. And really thinking of that as, what do we want to know more about? What are you curious about in your world? And taking that idea of how do you be curious and be open to what's ahead of you. And so understanding that, you have to start in the current. You have to, the current experiences, what is right now, and really understand the world around you to then be able to navigate and reimagine what is that future experience that could be. And so these kind of storytelling and visual tools that the young people have used, our community has used over and over again now, it just lights them up. Like, here's some drawings that, you're right, it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be beautiful, but it's powerful, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. And thank you for the visuals.
We're nodding.
And I'm going to go to Lexi, but also listening to both of you and just looking at those visuals, I'm reminded of something that Lexi said early on, both the moment, but healing, going forward, but also healing, looking back. And I saw that also represented in what you were just talking about and sharing and showing us. Lexi, I'm wondering what you think about systems change and how this work is integrated, the work of healing is integrated into the systems change work that you're doing.
So I think the important thing to understand, the work that I do is very, very grassroots. I've lived on the reservation my whole life, and especially when the pandemic hit, myself and my friends felt so disconnected. A group of 20-something-year-olds, like, we couldn't have our usual hangouts. We couldn't have our weekly dinners. That's what single 20-something-year-olds do. We hang out with other single 20-something-year-olds. And one thing that I will always remind our youth is that whether it's higher education, whether it's moving off reservation to try to make a living for themselves somewhere in the city, whether it's them applying for college or applying for a job for the first time, is something that's monumental for them. And I'm constantly reminding our kids, you're making moves in a system that was designed for us to fail. The system is not designed for us to thrive and for us to be successful and for us to be in the upper classes. This system was designed to keep us down, and I'm proud of you for applying for college, for going to community college, for getting a job, for getting 2 jobs, whatever it is, for getting your first apartment. And so when we see the lack of system, the system that I have to deal with is our tribal system, our tribal council, the nepotism within tribal communities, this is my work, you're not going to touch it. I don't care if we're doing the same thing. I don't want to collaborate with you. The very territorialism of it all. And my brother and I, my clan brother and I, we started an organization called Nurturing Indigenous Intelligence. And trust me, that took all day to come up with that, to come up with that title. And we finally said, let's just make it NI squared for short, just to a cute little play on words, because we saw that our students were being forgotten in the midst of the pandemic. They were being sent home to have to learn on technology. Most of our kids live with grandparents who have no idea what Zoom was to begin with, or how to operate a hotspot. Or we live in rural areas where you have to hold your phone up to make sure that it goes through. And so we saw that our kids were being left out. And we said, okay, we're capable. We have the money. We have the time. Let's give back. Let's give back to the community that made us who we are. We're, successful in our own way. And we looped our friends into it. We messaged them. We were just like, hey, this is the deal. You're good at math. You're going to keep our books for us. You're good at taking notes. You're going to keep our inventory for us. You two can draw. Come up with our logo and our flyers, and we'll do the rest. And so that's what we did. And we had this goal of about 1,200 backpacks full of school supplies for our kids. We estimate there's 12 villages on Hopi. We estimate about 100 backpacks, right? We get done. It took many, many nights. We fundraised. We bought out the local Walmarts with our own money. We did snow cone sales. We did whatever we could to make sure we had it. We had people sending us Amazon items. Whatever it was, we did it. And it took many nights, many arguments because someone wasn't doing something right to get it done. And we counted at the end, and we had organized over 1,500 backpacks full of school supplies for our kids on the reservation. And thank you. We said, let's not stop there. What else do our kids need? What did you need when you were in high school? What did you need when you were going to college? We have 2 college graduates in our group. My good friend Aeon, she graduated from Seattle University, and she is our secretary. She takes tremendous notes. Or no, she's our treasurer. I apologize. She's really good with numbers. And Joshua, his name's Josh, but I call him Joshua. He graduated in forestry degree, and he's one of our artists, our media guys. And so we said, what did you need when you were going to college? Because the rest of us didn't go to college. We took the very alternative route. But also, how do we include those kids that take alternative routes? We want to encourage our Indigenous kids that there's not just one path that doesn't work for everybody. Let's get apprenticeships set up for them. Let's get college form funds for them, basketball trips, whatever it was, let's do it. And it became, people say, oh, you're the kids that sell shaved ice, is what we became known as. And people were starting to figure out who we were. And we said, we're just kids helping kids, because the system here on the reservation is not built for kids to help kids or for young people to be in leadership. So we said, move, I'll do it myself. Because no one is doing it, no one wants to collaborate, no one wants to lend a helping hand. And we realized quickly that the helping hands came after. Let's see if they can do it first. And when we did it, they said, oh, let us help you. Let us collaborate. Let's have a meeting. And some of our workers were bitter. They were like, oh, now they want to help us. We already did it. We got it done. And I said, okay, let's figure it out. Let's see what we can do in partnership, because we need to hold the adults in our community accountable for our youth. It's not just kids holding kids accountable. We got to make sure that everybody is surrounded. And so when we talk about youth-centered healing, youth-centered organizing, that was the first crack we had, where it was just kind of like, we're just kids helping kids. We used whatever resources we had. We did with what we could, and I thank the Res Life for teaching us to use every bit of resources that you could possibly use, because when you don't have a lot, you got to make do with what you do have.
Thank you. And now it is your turn. I could sit here and talk to you all forever, but I'm not going to be selfish. So please, if you have a question or what you've heard resonates for you in a particular way that you want to share, please raise your hand, And I see we've already got a question or comment all the way in the back. And let us know who you are and where you're from.
Yatahei. My name is Jacob, from Farmington, New Mexico. I guess Lexi touched upon this, mainly talking about the elders in the community, and I think this may be out of the scope of the discussion, but I want to ask, how do you engage the older generations and the elders to talk about what healing, to talk about improving and growth? Because I think being around elders is very much very much is an involvement to youth healing. So I was wondering about that.
One thing that it's an internal struggle, because as Indigenous folks, we're taught to respect and be kind to our elders, and almost sometimes I feel like we're taught to kind of just give them a pass because they were raised in different times and maybe they don't understand the struggles that we are facing today. And so it's been a struggle to kind of sit there and be like, can you just listen first? Can we listen with intent? And it took, I had to practice in a mirror when we had a session, because we had to sit down with our elders, because they were like, what are you guys doing? What's going on? And we didn't want our parents to talk for us, because our parents were very much involved in this whole process. And I practiced in the mirror, and I said, when we're having this conversation, I want to ask that the older generations, our elders in the room, please listen with intent, listen to hear, and not listen to respond. And we'll do the same, showing that mutual respect. And I was so scared doing that, but it does take that further step to make that request, because a lot of times, unfortunately, I think it's like, kids are just on their devices all the time. They're doing this, they're doing that. It's like, I'm also checking emails. I got to keep up with social media. I got to do this, I got to do that. I'm texting other 3 people at the same time. I'm multitasking. But that's not what it looks like from their perspective. And so dealing with elders can sometimes be tough, but also knowing that they encourage us and instilled us to be strong, so they should also be able to respect that we have a strong voice and that we're standing for, so that we can all succeed, and not just kind of keep going with what's been happening for years and years and years.
So active listening, not just listening, not just waiting to talk. Right, exactly. Other questions in the room? Okay, great, thank you. And again, please tell us your name and where you're from.
Absolutely. So first off, I want to say thank you all for being on this panel and sharing your wisdom with us. It's been a very enlightening experience, and I just appreciate y'all's insight. My name is Jacob Verges. I'm representing Urban Strategies Council from California. And my question to y'all is, what in particular are y'all doing around mental health awareness and substance use disorders in regards to providing those spaces for the youth, but then also breaking the stigmas around them? Because I know that with those topics in particular, it can be hard for the older generation, or even some of our generation, to fully understand, because there's not too much knowledge about that. So what are y'all doing to, I guess, increase that knowledge so that everyone can feel accepted?
Nice, important question. Who wants to take it up?
I can jump in just quickly that the good thing about COVID, because it wasn't a good thing, but the good thing about COVID is that it really gave us all a new awareness of trauma and mental health, and that these are words that any human on earth, and animals actually, and plants actually, can experience. All living forms can experience mental health issues and trauma. And it also gave us kind of a focused lens through which to look at how are we addressing mental health and behavioral health issues. In the pu'uhonua that we described, mental health is a very important thing for us, because most of the youth that we serve have dealt with various sources of trauma, including historical trauma in their lifetimes. And so, even on the farm with some of the young people that we employ, every day is a day that they are walking through coping with the mental, with the mental health issues and trauma that they are trying to resolve on a day-to-day basis. Some of them couldn't come because of the issues that also trigger their mental health issues, whether it's homelessness or family members that are homeless, or getting transportation that you don't have anymore, and goes on and on and on and on. So the best that we can do, what we do is make sure that our staff are trauma informed, all of them. Provide people that are trained, like social workers, like Melissa in the back there. And we have a licensed psychiatrist that comes a couple of times a week and is there however much we need her. And our state has actually created an Office of Wellness and Resilience, which is about mental health issues. And we've passed legislation, and we seek to be a state a trauma-informed state. And so I think we're kind of progressive as a state. This position will report directly to the governor, so it's in the executive office. And so we're really hopeful that some of the changes that we're working on in our place will also be able to be scaled across the state, and that we can work in partnership with them. Yeah.
I've seen in our communities when I talked about some of the collaboratives that have come together, the focus on resilient and auto really was at the center of that, how to focus on our strengths and the resilience and create spaces to talk about different practices for wellness. So we have a significant Hmong population in our community, and the youth suicide rates went up and really skyrocketed during the pandemic. What I saw as the response was so beautiful was, I think the traditional ways in the schools, right, the way that they do it is like, here's the counselor, handle it and go through a therapist. But the community rallied, and the Hmong Cultural Center said, hey, let's take these families camping, and we're gonna go outside and we're gonna go camp together, and we're gonna have a campfire, and we're gonna talk about these things. And then we're going to introduce and bring in the different providers and people that do have more of the sources of strength training and other ways for the parents and the family to all work together and create that sense of connection and community. And just working with the youth mental health, having the youth mental health first aid, and really creating places to understand, we have to be able to recognize the signs and see that, and have ways for our young people to know how to also flag that and know who they can reach out to in those connections. And that's been really motivating to see the community come together in that way.
And really breaking down the stigma, I think, to the point of the question, and educating broadly. It's terrific work, important work. I see a question all the way in the back.
I'll try to speak loud enough to be heard. Hi everyone, Duluth Smith with Duluth Prize for Music. We'd love to hear you all speak a little bit about the intentionality of culture transmission as part of this healing work with young people.
Cultural transmission. Could you just say a little bit more about what you're speaking to?
In a lot of these systems, cultural forms are pushed out to margins. And so I'm wondering how you all, as you're building these not building new practices, you're rebuilding the heritage in all these ways you're describing. And so just curious to know how the cultural exchange, intergenerational cultural exchange or growth is blossoming in these new spaces.
Yeah, handing down cultural practices generation to generation.
I think for me specifically, it's been fortunate. It's been really organic. I was not raised in a traditional home, but some of my friends were. And so when we're doing this work, when we're collecting with younger folks, we've been asked to do stuff with high school age students and middle school age students or junior high. It's happened organically through clan relations. We introduce ourselves, you know, I'm from here, I'm from this village, or like the good old, who's your grandma? Like, who are your parents? You know, that kind of conversation, and letting them know, like, oh, recognizing immediately, I'm your aunt, I'm your grandma, you're like my relation that way, and sharing information and making, we had to really open up spaces for our kids to feel welcome. If you work with tribal youth, you know, if you have food, they will come. And that was part of our thing, was we gotta feed these kids. We gotta make sure transportation, you know, making it easy enough for them, making it accessible for them, and not gatekeeping the information that we had, but really opening it up to say, you're welcome at this space. Let's just kind of get together and talk. And if you have any questions about culture, or maybe you're not too sure on your clan role, you know, we're young people, but we'll share what we know. And if we don't know the answer, then we find an older person to really bring it in. And so really being intentional about making our cultural values and our cultural teachings accessible to them. If they needed a ride, we figured that out. We were like, okay, you can take your mom's big old SUV and you can pick up these kids, and I'll take my truck, and we'll, you know, really doing with it intentionality, because we didn't have that as when we were growing up. But really making sure that, okay, I don't want these kids to feel lost or displaced as they get older and have to relearn who they are and where they come from.
John?
Do you want?
Yeah, please.
Cultural transmission is something that we do every day. And, you know, in our various programs, especially at Kupa'aina and at Kinai'eha, whether we're learning about the food that we're growing, whether we're learning about the values that we lead by, whether we're learning in Hawaiian society, everyone had a purpose and a role. And so whether it's supporting youth to find their value, their place, their role, and their path, all of that is cultural. In terms of like the deeper ike or knowledge, we work with various kupuna and cultural practitioners who come. And, you know, not everybody wants to learn culture on day one, right? They're like, really? Like, I'm on my phone. But once you do ignite that passion, you find that they're very, you know, they tend to eat it up and love it. We taught an early college credit course on our farm on growing kalo and the meaning of kalo in our society, and the fact that our people come from kalo in our creation story. And you know, all of the young men back there, they all can introduce themselves in Hawaiian. They've learned their olelo Hawai'i, which is our language, and different words. And, you know, some of them are more interested than others. And one of them is Chukis in learning Hawaiian. So there's culture, you know, in that too. And we're happy to share and learn also from each other. I think all of that is cultural transmission. I'm not sure if that's what you were getting at. Mahalo.
Great. Yes, perfect.
Hello, my name is Ashley. I'm here on behalf of OYU from New Orleans. Being that my city have a tribalistic history, the culture doesn't necessarily, the community doesn't live in that culture. And tourism definitely masks a lot of the local experience. So my question to you was, do you all have any provisional practices that can work with tourism in your...
So I don't know how to answer that question. Right now, it's a tough time in Hawaii. Just to give you a little context, so last month we had 1 million people come to our place, and there's only 1.4 million people that live in our state. And that puts us on a projection of 12 million people a year coming to our tiny little islands that have very few resources. I'm kind of anti-tourism, so I should not answer this question. I should just stop. No, we have lots of ideas though. We would love for tourists to learn about our history before they come, to maybe engage in community service when they arrive, to interact and not to actually stay in Waikiki and not come into all of our backyards. I mean, there's like all kinds of beautiful things. When I went to the Galapagos, every car that they bring onto the island, there's one that's taken off the island, at the different islands that they have. And so we would love for practices like that, but then we're up against big industry. You know, most of the money that is made in Hawaii does not stay in Hawaii. It goes out to all the hotels and rental cars and, like rental car agencies and everywhere else. So yeah, but we should talk more. And I hope one of you are gonna ask, when are we going to Hawaii? OYF, right? Come on.
Oh, Steve. What, Lexi, looks like you had.
I was hesitant to answer because I'm also a little bit anti-tourism as well. Because of COVID, the tourism on the reservation, was shut down, but we were still finding people who were like sneaking in, and we're like, tourism is bad for the environment, but it's also has its pros and cons. We want people to actually learn and to understand who we are, but not tokenize us like, oh my God, I'm taking pictures of the natives. You know what I mean? Like I don't want our people to be on display like that. And but tourism also brings in a lot of income for a lot of our people because they're self-employed, do arts and crafts. And so when COVID hit and everything was shut down, a lot of our people suffered because that was their only means of income. And so it was kind of like pros and cons. Like I was like, can we ship your items off somewhere? Can I help with posting it on my social media? Not to like brag or anything, hey, but like I can help, let me share your post, get a page, I'll help you run it. Trying to get our people to understand that, we don't have to rely on that because we were seeing a lot less traffic, but it also didn't generate as much money as it was before COVID. So tourism is kind of a tricky situation because you don't want to just put your people on display like that.
Double-edged sword. Great question. Thank you. Question in the back. We have a question here. Are there other questions? And then there's another question in the back. If you could ask your question, and then we'll take this question so the panel can try to respond to both of them before we have to wrap up. Please.
Got you. Okay. Hi, I'm Zanetta Zepeda. I'm with Fresh Tracks. My question was, right now we're finding a lot of different ways that we can improve on our parents' and our grandparents' generational trauma. And, we're moving forward healing. What do you think the next 7 generations is going to find to improve on our healings that we're finding here now?
I literally heard the whole audience go, ooh.
That's deep.
Look to the future. Beautiful question. So we'll take that one, and then if you could share with us your question, please.
Okay. Hello again. I guess to piggyback off cultural, like passing down the culture to the next generation, my other question was like, how do you reinforce that I don't know how to say it, living it, how do you reinforce living the culture rather than like after you learn it, how do you reinforce living it, I guess?
So integrate it into your day-to-day practices and living, is that where, okay. So those are our final 2 questions. I will let you all choose what you want to answer, which question you might want to answer.
I think to the future question, I think there's hope in continuing to reimagine and taking the lessons of, what I've seen and heard in our youth and that have now kind of grown up in this movement, reflecting now of like the burnout and how much they take on their shoulders. And so I hope that those lessons go forward and that in the future we don't have this practice of the savior kind of mentality that like it's me against the world and I have to do it all because nobody else. And how do we get to that like true collective community holding each other? And in that way, and to passing down culture and the daily practices, sometimes I think about like the exercising metaphor, you know, like the idea of like, oh, you know, I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna do these things. I know I have to do these things. But the practice and the idea of if I just put my sneakers on in the morning, that's it. Like, I don't have to make any other plans, at least I put my sneakers on. So if you think about the cultural practices that you want to bring into your life and do in a more daily way, how do you make it more accessible? How do you just take that first step versus feeling like you have to go in all the way and be upset with yourself about and continue to like look at yourself and go, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing it well enough. It's like, just put your sneakers on.
Nicely said. It's to go to the January 1st resolution. By January 15th, it's over when you set the bar at a place that's hard to attain. So that's very helpful. Lexi, looks like you want to say something.
With the 7 generations remark, I would hope that our kids our kids and our grandkids, because low-key, I cannot wait to be a grandma. I kind of want to skip being a mom and going straight to be a grandma, because that looks like more fun. But I want them to be able to thrive in a place where they're armed with coping mechanisms. They're armed with, you know, because, you know, unfortunately, these things in our community we're still, you know, going to see people drinking in our families. We're still going to see, unfortunately, with the drugs coming in all the time, constantly into the reservations and all these things, that our kids are armed with coping mechanisms. I really hope that my future grandkids can say, you know, I did that so I don't have to struggle. You know, I really hope my grandkids aren't going to be sitting on a therapist's couch being like, you know what, yo, my grandma, you know, she did this, she's crazy, and all these things, because I'm really hopeful for this generation now that they kind of hold the mirror up to us. They say, this is what's going on in our community. This is what you're enabling, and you're not doing anything about it. And I really hope that when our kids, you know, come around and they go on to have kids, that it's like, I don't have to hold the mirror up anymore, because I'm accountable for what I do, and that I'm going to be a good person in the society. I'm gonna, you know, teach our young people the language where, you know, grandma taught us this so that we don't have to struggle. She made it accessible so that we don't have to beg other people, that we don't have to find our culture in the books and documentaries about us. We know we don't have to study ourselves like we're a lost people. So when healing from us, I think when I do the work, it's with that intention that I don't want my grandkids to have to deal with this. I don't want my great-grandkids to struggle. I want to be able for them to enjoy and thrive and create new systems where they don't have to, you know, fight the power, you know, where they don't have to be aim. They don't have to, you know, fight for it, that it'll just be accessible, and we're doing that work now.
Yeah, I'm going to take that home. We don't have to study ourselves like we're a lost people. Yeah. Nice. Sean, you want to bring us home?
Well, I think these two women just answered those two questions brilliantly. And, you know, healthy, thriving communities in our future is what we will see. We just have to keep striving for it. And I learned from a Maori elder. She said two things that were helpful for me. And somebody here is a chief of a Louisiana tribe recently. And one of the gentlemen said, remain open. But she said the things that we have to worry about as leaders as we prepare for those 7 generations ahead is to allow new voices to help create the vision forward, because the vision that we have isn't necessarily the future vision, right? And so like you were talking about. And then the second thing is to prepare our warriors, because there's still battleground to be fought. And then how do we welcome our weary warriors who have fought so hard home again? And how do we embrace them? So those are some things that we have to do in our caretaking in preparing for those 7 generations.
So we are at the end of our time, and I want to thank you all for laughing, Lexi. I don't know if you were laughing at that one. I want to thank you all for sharing so openly and so beautifully with us, and so authentically, and for the work that you do. And I would ask you all to join me in thanking this panel for sharing with us today.